What did you buy with your first ever work paycheck? I actually have a funny story about this. I lived in a big city near a beach, and it flooded a lot, so there were a ton of drains in the curbs. It was a windy day. I finished my second week at DQ, got my check, and called my friend. We walked to the nearest bank and cashed my $150 check. It was the most money my 15-year-old self had ever had, and I, like a complete idiot, was waving my $150 in 50s in the air when a gust of wind hit me in just a perfect way and blew my money right out of my hand into one of the gutters. My friend and I spent 3 hours trying unsuccessfully to fish it out. It was 2002, I had a summer job I got through school. It was cleaning the streets and painting over graffiti. It was a relatively easy job, still had to wake up early and show up though. I was paid around $5.50 hour. My first paycheck I took my dad, who was my ride to and from work, to the gas station and filled his gas tank. I earned about $90 for that pay period and $30 went to gas. I'll do it again if I could. I cherished that look on my old man's face and I remember it like it was yesterday. He passed 5 years later. I cannot remember what I bought with my first paycheck, but I do remember about 6 months later I spent my entire paycheck on clothing. I was 16. My pay was $100 for a 2-week period and my sister and I spontaneously went shopping for spring-summer clothes. I can remember how irresponsible I felt afterwards. I regularly remember this in present day as I pony up a casual $1,000 because another fucking appliance broke or another home maintenance shit needs to get done. No idea. Probably comics. I had to start saving pretty much ASAP to get a car. To keep going to work I carpooled, but I needed my own way there for days that other person didn't work. I then didn't like that car, and had someone co-sign for a loan to buy another. I had zero money for a good year as I paid off the loan pretty fast under a year. The first non-essential item I bought was a gaming laptop that lasted maybe 3 years before it started to crap out. I was supposed to pay rent, but my paycheck was directly deposited to a bank account that I opened with a guarantor who never removed her name. The guarantor stole my entire first paycheck just so I couldn't pay rent and would have to move back in with her. Luckily, my landlord was an old acquaintance who gave me until end of month after listening to my circumstances. And now my guarantor tries to gaslight me every time I bring it up. It was 1976, I was making a whopping $2.50 hour at age 16, 20 cents higher than minimum wage, and it was an office job so I wasn't on my feet all day. Family didn't have a lot of money, which is why I started working while in the 11th grade. So with my first paycheck I took my mom and brothers out to dinner at Big Boy. I remember being all proud to say get whatever you want, even a combo meal and a milkshake. It's on me. My mom was raised with the bare minimum. At times, even less than. When she had me and my brother, her goal was to make sure we never had to struggle for anything. She's given my everything I can ask for and then some. My first real job was when I was 23, my first paycheck was just over $200 and I spent every penny on her. It felt so good to finally be able to give back to her and I continue to do so to this day. Not my first job, but my first job that allowed me to have disposable income. It was nearly 4 times my previous pay. 20 years ago I bought myself a pair of Oakley Juliet sunglasses, cost me about $600 cause they were made of some titanium alloy stuff or something like that. I still have them today. But I don't wear them cause I can't repair them if something breaks. They are just a collector item for me now. I had to pay for the damage that I did to my mom's car. 1983 Mercury Grand Marquis station wagon. It took everything I earned that summer. I was 14, 5 foot nothing, 90 pounds soaking wet, drove to the next town at 2 a.m. on a dare and sideswiped a car. I might have jacked up the exhaust and undercarriage also because I took a set of railroad tracks a little bit fast on the way home. I got an apprenticeship in 2007 where I started on a massive £3.75 per hour. That first pay hit my bank account and it was something like £600, which I'd never had before in my life. I bought a huge 32 TV and a laptop and then had no money for a month. Still have the TV in my bedroom, works great with a Fire Stick although it's so old the bezels are as wide as my phone screen. Saved up my first several paychecks to buy all the parts and build my dream gaming PC. I was in my late teens, I think. The whole thing cost me $2,000, but I lived with my parents and had no other bills to pay. I remember being super excited when I installed Oblivion on the PC and it auto-detected my specs to put all the graphical settings on the highest possible settings. White Wizard over the top 2009. Extremely, Criminally underrated band. Except each album is a different fucking band and that's why they fell off. The bassist owner is a dick. Brilliant, but a dick. That's how Children was born, and that kid from their first album, High Speed GTO, can power scream unlike any man from our generation. Also feloniously unknown. I bought a wristwatch that was a universal remote for TVs. It was the 90s and that was about the coolest thing I had ever seen up until that point. Brought it to school and my friend ended up turning the TV in my math teacher's room on a bunch of times to annoy him until he went to his desk and buried his head in his arms. I never brought it to school after that. My dad supposedly put it in a savings account for me. I was too young. I'd been cast in a movie, but I later learned that he had spent it all on booze. The second check before I knew the first was gone was used to buy a ton of groceries and some rent, I guess, and very most likely booze. But I had felt so grown up contributing to the household. About $20 of my first paper route earnings, for the pizza buffet and soft drinks, and some arcade games, with my best friend. While the shape I've been in has varied over the years, I've kept the stamina I built up hauling around damn near my weight in newsprint. For long endurance rides, hikes with a loaded up pack, and running a used Xbox and a new copy of Fable 1. I remember picking up the check at work, going to my bank in the same parking lot and cashing it, and then running across the 4-lane highway to GameStop to get the last used original Xbox they had, and then having to call my dad to come get me from the store's phone because I didn't have a cell phone yet. My family owned a construction business, and my father had me on site for as long as I could remember. I don't remember the first thing I ever bought with what he paid me, but I remember the first thing I set out to buy and had to work for weeks to get the money for. It was a Lego castle set. $49. I'm almost 50 now, and I still have it. My first real job was a part-time bakery gig in my hometown that paid $5. 15 hours, which was minimum wage in my state at the time. I think I was a sophomore in high school and I spent my first paycheck on a black Nintendo DS Lite. I forget what the first game I got for it was, but most likely it was the latest Pokémon title. Technically I started working when I was around 6 and I shoveled snow around the condo complex I lived. There was no paycheck as far as I know unless my dad took them, and I'm pretty sure he did. Though I'd consider my first real job was a paper route I had when I was around 10 and I bought Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction. I was still in high school. I worked in a thrift shop much like a Canadian version of Goodwill. I had a habit of buying toy cars from the store itself to take apart and use the parts inside to build robots. Old audio systems were great for getting a bunch of buttons and potentiometers for electronics projects. I took my mom out to a fancy French restaurant. I had no idea how much it was going to cost, then plus tip, I didn't even have enough, so she had to help me pay the rest. My mom still joke about that from time to time when we go out with the family. That was almost 25 years ago. Damn, time flew by. It wasn't my first paycheck because I had to find a shop that had one or could get one for me, a 1991 Colt .45. I wanted a 1911 model, but the guy I bought it from told me it was the next closest thing to one and for a lot less money. Still one of my favorite weapons to take to the range. Used to mow lawns and do odd jobs for cash when I was a kid. When I got my first real paycheck that I had to cash at a bank, I saved every penny for several months until I bought my first car at age 16. Had zero expenses back then, which made it easy to save money. Fun memory, pot, probably. But the first thing I ever saved up to buy was a Gibson Melody Maker guitar that a friend was selling. It had a terrible refinished job, thin, narrow, neck, and he routed it out in order to cram two P90 pickups into it. But it was a screamer, and a blast to play a cell phone, or fast food. I was 15, so I didn't have bills, but I could only get a phone if I could pay for it. Most of my checks were phone, gas money when I got a car, books, clothes, and I donated to 2 animals rescues. I didn't save anything, which I regret in hindsight. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. This was circa 1991. I bought a pair of Reebok blacktop basketball shoes. They were like $60 and that was the first pair of nice sneakers I ever purchased. Everything prior to that had been hand-me-downs or generics from Walmart, etc. Oh gosh, I don't remember. I was 15 and that was almost 2 decades ago. I think some shoes? Probably fast food because growing up we always had food at home, so I never got to eat at restaurants. Probably candy too, because we didn't keep that in the house either. But he had on board and a Sound Blaster 16. The change from PC speaker beeps think soundtrack rendered by a smoke alarm to fully realized sound and synthesized instrumentation was huge. Games sounded amazing, better than the consoles of the time. Was quite happy. Oh man, my first paycheck? I blew it on this epic gaming console I'd been eyeing forever. It was like a rite of passage into adulthood with a side of serious gaming sessions. Maybe not the most responsible move, but the joy it brought was totally worth it. A guitar. It was a heavily customized Schecter with a custom paint job, a custom pickguard, and aftermarket tuning pegs and pickups. It had an amazing setup for my playstyle. I got it for $300, and it plays and sounds better than some of my $1,000 guitars. Mostly an electric bill my family owed on, but also treated myself to a nice Chinese food dinner, succulent Chinese meal. Back then, we were in pretty significant poverty, so eating out at all, even something cheap like Chinese takeout, felt really special. I was 14 and got a job as a busboy at a local barbecue joint. With my first check, I went and bought myself a pair of blue-brown Airwalk shoes. I remember how cool it felt to be able to buy something for myself and not have to ask my parents. Me, my brother and a friend all sat outside GameStop to buy PS4s when they first came out on Black Friday with the money from our new jobs. It was our first big purchase. I still use the PS4 all the time, so definitely worth every penny. I bought an Apple Watch back when they first got released. I remember having the burrito button Chipotle app, which I thought was wicked cool. Ended up returning it because I had absolutely dropped $700 on it. Good choice, smiley face.